And just really quick, my name is Lori Allen Requa. I'm here at the Peralta District. I'm actually biology faculty at Laney College and what am I? Distance ed coordinator both at the district and at Laney. And I am here to introduce two people that I'm very excited to hear from, Dr. Yolanda Harper and Dr. William Woods. They're both from the University of Arizona, the Global Campus. And they are going to talk to us about motivating students to learn from failure. There's a couple outcomes that we're going to discuss, and that's discussing various characteristics and challenges of students who struggle to pass college assignments and courses. I wish I had had this session when I was a college student. Share practical strategies to facilitate successful college turnarounds after a student has experienced failure. So with those two outcomes, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Harper and Dr. Woods. Thank you so much for being with us today.
All right, we have some very nice slides for you today that put on the screen now. And, I'm glad to be here. And so thank you for being here with us. I'm Dr. William Woods, and I've been teaching almost 30 years now. And so I've seen it all on a regular campus and then also on the virtual campus. And the question is, what about failure with students? And I know what some students think about failure, and I've seen the opposite of it on failure too. Some students didn't care, and some students care deeply. Some students let failure define them. And first thing we're going to do is show you a quick video. It's about 30 seconds long. This Damon Brown, here he is.
Only people that I coach get confused and think that success is just you having runaway hits. That's not how it works. It's not how it ever works. If you're not failing regularly, as one person said, then you might be playing it a little bit too safe.
So what we want to start with then is to look at how do you define failure? And so we have a little poll here. And what does failure mean to students? And so there's failure that you might experience as a little kid in potty training. And then there's failure when it comes to how you eat, what you eat as a little kid. And then there's failure with the Lego blocks. I mean, there's all kind of little failures. But what does that mean so far as you're concerned when you think about your definition of failure? And so everybody go ahead and enter your information in, and I'm going to read off some of it to you, share with everyone.
So there are two ways to engage. You can go to slido.com and enter that code 1042064, or you can scan the QR code on your device and it'll take you there. And your responses are anonymous, but they should start popping on the screen once you start typing.
Yeah. All right, somebody said not getting it right. Now that covers a lot of things in life. There's people who don't get it right in marriage. There's people who don't get it right when they're parking. Someone said something really neat. A chance to learn. Woo! And I don't quite know what that me means. That you're a failure, or what does that me mean?
I think that was their definition for themselves. So maybe not complete. I think not completing a set goal goes with the me.
Okay, thank you very much.
And then below they have students, because we asked two different questions. What does it mean to you, and what does failure mean to students?
And actually, where I misinterpreted what was going up on the screen, that me actually becomes important too, because some of us have that internal dialogue that we have going on with ourselves when we feel that we are a failure. And so not completing a set goal, and that's a fantastic one there. Judgment, judgment and not completing a set goal go hand in hand together, because especially if you're a student who's married and you're supposed to pass a class, and if you don't pass a class, then you and your spouse are going to have to pay for that class all over again. That's a tough one. Not getting what I thought I wanted or not getting it the first time.
Mm.
You know, I want to be one of those professors that will share with you that when I was in my undergrad years, I was in an econ class, and it's my first econ class ever. And I failed the test, the very first test in the class. And, you know, that was kind of messed up for me. And I went up to the professor and I said, you know, my F on this test has nothing to do with how you're teaching the class. I said, this is all just a foreign language for me. I've never had this subject matter before, and I don't know how to think about it so that I can have it something that I can relate it to help me remember it. And so one student says, finishing or quitting,
And
hard,
several people said opportunity.
that's the big one,
Yeah, that's the big one.
and the capacity, attempt, try, able, a chance to learn, something I'll remember. Okay, failure. I wish that was false, something I'll remember. But then again, I'm glad that it's not. Because if you forget, how do you keep from failing again if you forgot what it took to get to fail the first time? So that's significant. A chance to move towards success. You're going to see that that's a popular theme right there, a chance to move towards success. That means here in college or anywhere else in life, you know that a person is learning if they have a change in their behavior. And one of the changes in behavior may be how they study, and then the outcome that results from how they study to be able to all of a sudden be successful. Not meeting expectations. That is kind of deep because it's like, whose expectations? Is it your own expectations, or is someone else watching over you and they influence your life and they are betting on you and hoping that this is what you're going to do? And does a failure on your part impact the whole family? Because the family has a reputation of being successful. Are you a Kennedy? And if you think about the Kennedys, man, they've had attorney generals in their families, they've had presidents in their families, they've had secretaries of health and human services now in their family, and they've had like 3 generations of public service going on. And so, I mean, if you fail, does it impact the whole family? And so, are you the first failure in your family? So, not accomplishing something we are working on. And for students not passing a course, woo. And passing a course, now I don't in a way I look at that and say that's not all that bad if it's a 5-week course compared to a 15-week course. Because in 5 weeks I can now have that thing all turned around and then move on to success. So I want to thank you all for putting that information
Yes, thank you.
and sharing that with us, because it's something that we need to think about. Now, what I'm going to do is share some quotes with you by some very famous people. And I think it's very, very important to think about how these people thought about success, but moreover, how they thought about failure, because these were people who actually were used to failing, but also had great success in the same breath. So here we have, don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. John Wooden. He was the coach of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And earlier in his life, he was Lou Alcindor while he was at UCLA. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being coached by him, it led to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being one of the ultimate successes in the National Basketball Association. John Wooden is one of the most winning coaches ever, especially when it comes to championships. So he says, don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. Dr. Harper, would you get the next one, please?
The next slide or the next?
The next quote.
Okay. So a person who never made a mistake Never tried anything new. Wow. Great choice, Dr. Woods. Albert Einstein.
So, one of the things they talk about with your cart being pulled by an ox, each tire of your cart, each wheel of your cart flows into ruts out in the farm. And the rut, if you stay in it, then you're staying in a groove. But sometimes if you want to go another direction, and you have to come up out of that rut, and out of the rut, getting out of it, one, and then getting onto a new path, that's risk, especially if you don't have a marked territory to go through, and so you don't know exactly what you're going to hit. But that's why this country exists, because people took all different kind of risks. It didn't always turn out good for everybody that they came across, but that's part of the thing that is a forms America. So failure is not the opposite of success; it's part of success. Now, let me ask you this: if you were going to hire someone, would you hire a person that's always been successful, or would you hire a person that may have had a few failures? And I want you to think about that. Because one of the things when you think about it is like, okay, how does this person that's giving me in an interview all these wonderful things about themselves and the accolades that they're sharing, how can they tell me about handling failure if they've never failed? How can they tell me about the attitude that you have to have and how you get back on track after you've gotten off track? So now check this out. Robert F. Kennedy. He was on his way to becoming president of the United States back in, I think, 1965. Only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. And what's great about him is, okay, he was an attorney general serving under his brother, President John F. Kennedy, and he also was a New York senator, and then he was campaigning successfully to become president of the United States until things happened badly in California for him. But you may think, okay, that dream ended because he was assassinated. But if you take another look at Robert F. Kennedy and even his brother John F. Kennedy, sometimes our success may not be evident to everybody else, but what about our legacy?
Mm-hmm.
And see, what we're doing as professors is we're taking the legacy that we have through the knowledge that we have, and we're extending it to our students. And we're working with them to help them see what we've already seen. We've already seen success academically, and now we're trying to help them see success academically, especially if they've experienced failure on an assignment or failure on a class like we just read about a little bit ago. The only real mistake is one from which we learn nothing. Henry Ford. And I want you to think about Henry Ford. He had trouble getting everything that he needed to start his company because there was already rules in place that would prohibit him from getting what he wanted. But after a while, he just stayed at it, stayed at it, stayed at it. He's one of those that was known as a captain of industry. And then he finally broke through with the one car that could change our whole world, where all of a sudden now regular people, regular employees that were making the car could afford the car. And he set it up so that there could be financing and everything. And investors started to like that idea. And so then they invested in the company, and there he was. So he learned. And ask yourself what you're learning from the mistakes that you're making. And one of the things that lets me know that someone's not learning and that it's a cue for me to do something different with that person is if they are loaded with excuses. So my advisor, my professor, other students, my mother, my father, my roommate. You know, one of the things you'll see when plagiarism occurs sometimes is roommates are sharing a computer, and sometimes I've seen it where a student will say, well, it's my roommate's fault. And it's like, okay, they're not learning. And what's it take to get them past that? And I will tell you, as a father, I used to tell my kids, look, whatever you're doing, if you mess up, fess up. If you mess up, fess up, because if you fess up, you get in a lot less trouble than if you lie to me about it or try to cover it up. So my kids were really good about fessing up, and I went a lot easier on them when they did that. Failure is the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. Now think about, let that sink in and consider that, to be more intelligent about it. And when you think about Edison and making the light bulb, and he continued to fail and fail and fail hundreds of times over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden he got it. And that's one of the reasons why America jumped forward, because not only did he get it about the light bulb, but there was other captains of industry who were also getting it about electrifying America and figuring out how to electrify America. And so then that made it so that America could do even more. Okay, the next slide. So we have this video, and these are a lot of successful people who weren't successful at first. Please play.
After being cut from his high school basketball team, he went home, locked himself in his room, and cried. He wasn't able to speak until he was almost 4 years old, and his teachers said he would never amount to much. Was demoted from her job as a news anchor because she wasn't fit for television. Fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination and having no original ideas. At age 11, he was cut from his team after being diagnosed with a growth hormone deficiency, which made him smaller in stature than most kids his age. At 30 years old, he was left devastated and depressed after being unceremoniously removed from the company he started. A high school dropout whose personal struggles with drugs and poverty culminated in an unsuccessful suicide attempt. A teacher told him he was too stupid to learn anything and that he should go into a field where he might succeed by virtue of his pleasant personality. Rejected by Decca Recording Studios, who said, "We don't like their sound. They have no future in show business." His first book was rejected by 27 publishers. His fiancée died, failed in business, had a nervous breakdown, and was defeated in 8 elections. If you've never failed, you've never tried anything new.
And that's the end of that video. Can we have the next slide? Hey, did you notice some of the people that were calling these people failures? They were teachers. And what is it about teachers telling a child or even a grown-up student that you're not going to amount to anything. And man, I tell you what, sometimes you do look at adult students and man, this student is nothing but trouble. But would you say that to a student? Got to get to our next slide. That wasn't the last slide.
Yeah, it's being slow, so I'm going to advance it manually.
Okay. And the reason why I'm bringing that up to you is because you can speak failure into a person's life, or you can speak success into a person's life, because you may have been the first person to really truly be able to see their potential. And you'll find this everywhere across America, where somebody at some point sees the potential of the person and is able to talk to them about staying the course instead of giving up, and then letting an event in their life, letting a time in their life define who they are. So what we were interested in doing in this presentation is redefining, reclassifying failure. And when we're reclassifying failure, we're looking at how we as professors think about what failure is. And it's not a textbook definition. It's something that goes beyond that. So reclassifying failure, the challenge. Think about when you have it when students go into interviews. And one of the things that happens in an interview is that the interviewer will say to the interviewee, so what is it about yourself that your resume does not say about you? And so that's one of your big challenges, to reclassify whatever's on your resume and be able to tell them something different about yourself. And you imagine talking in an interview about failure? Because your employer gets to see, they get to see your I messed up a little bit there. Your report card. I didn't want to say that. Well, they get to see your report card with the classes that you're taking. They may even see your grades on there. They may even see your grade point average. So what about professors? So what can you do to reclassify failure? How about when a student fails a class? Now you can look at that and have a student who's failed the class 2 times in a row come into your class. And you see, and you know it. Oh man, I got this person who's failed this class. Matter of fact, not only have they failed the class a couple times, they've been found to have plagiarized a couple times. So does that classify them as a failure at that point? Yolanda, Dr. Harper, could you talk about that?
I would say I would never classify an individual as a failure because that's putting the adjective on the individual. So a person may not succeed at the goal that they had at the moment, but that doesn't make the person a failure. So I think maybe events can be failed events in some frameworks, but people are never failure, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's think about this. What can we say to the student at that point if they failed a class or failed an assignment?
Yeah, so also we'd like for you to share your ideas in the chat. I've got some examples later, but certainly I always I'll try to look for, even if an assignment is failed or a class is failed, some component was passed, something was passed. So I find something to praise, whether it's persistence, for having the courage to try. As I'll share later, that I admire everything that you were able to accomplish under some very challenging circumstances. And
Now, that's one of the things that's very, very, very difficult
Hmm.
from the standpoint of, did the person on an assignment or a class, did they fail badly? How many assignments had they missed? How many tests did they not pass? How bad was it that they failed? Because sometimes you're having to help them think way past whatever their habitual behavior is to get them into a new behavior so that they can start to find success. And one of the things uh, I counsel parents sometime, and I said, look, your job as a parent is to see for your kids until they can see for themselves. And as professors, sometimes we have to see for our students until they can see for themselves. And one of the things that a student will sometimes say is, you're the only one who believed in me.
And that's why I love the word yet. So they may not have yet succeeded, but I use future-based language. However, when next time, moving forward, I think, and to not overfocus. So learn from what we need to learn from, and now how are we going to use that information as we move forward?
Yeah, very good. Shirley Jordan in our audience, she says, I tell them that when someone says you will be nothing, use that as your motivation to be successful.
I love that. I love that. And I know so many examples of people who have taken negative messages from others as their motivation to prove those individuals wrong.
And Rhea, she's in here and she says, I never give a failing grade on an assignment. I give a not yet. This is Dr. Harper's talk right here. Not yet grade to allow the student to meet with me and go over the requirements. And it's neat about that because you got this high level of confidentiality. And so the student knows that you hear them, that you see them, that you're going to listen to them, and then you're going to advise them, and that you're going to support them, that you're going to be there for them. And so I think that's a beautiful thing right there. And I want to read another one to you. Her name is Irina. She says, we always give the student feedback, acknowledgement, the positive areas, what was missing, and can give the student a chance to redo and add to the assignment and have it regraded to potential full credit. We give this opportunity for all assignments where the students didn't earn full credit. This is a personal growth class. And by the time we get to this end of this presentation, there's something that I want you to see that about that personal growth that will make sense. Okay, what about the student who's failing because of poor math skills or math phobia? Some students will be convinced, I can't do math. But yet
And
it's our job.
unfortunately, in our society, saying that is popular and socially acceptable to be afraid of math or not good at math, so that's reinforced culturally. And so overcoming that and helping students to think about, it's just another set of skills. You didn't come here reading and writing and walking, but you learned them and these are just other skills that you can learn. And if there's access on the campus to mental health services, the phobia part can certainly be addressed.
Yeah, it's amazing. Some of our students, the backgrounds that they come from. Like earlier in my career, I had a Latino student. She was the first in her family to ever go to college. And the thing about her being the first in her family to go to college, her father didn't agree with her going to college at all. Didn't want her in college, didn't want to invest in college, and he didn't believe that girls should go to college. And so for her, that's a lot of pressure. And when you think about this is just a person that's having trouble with math, uh, it's more than that because she's got to prove herself. And people who have to prove themselves to the people around them, and they have that dialogue going on around, hey, I didn't do good at math. There's a parent saying that. It's not important. You can get a job without math. And they're hearing all that, and that's a defeatist attitude. And so when you think about one generation having a defeatist attitude, talking to another generation and sowing that same seed into their lives, that's a tough one for that student to overcome, because now they're having to think about themselves, but at the same time, they're having to find a way to shut that down. And a lot of times I do believe that the only way to shut that down is having a good, strong connection in college with faculty and other successful students who can put a new dialogue in your head. So failing because of life circumstances. And sometimes students don't even want to talk about their life circumstances. And I'll tell you what, there's been times in my career where I didn't even believe some of their life circumstances. And I think I was right to do that, because I had one student, I started writing down his life circumstances because his grandparents, which back then divorce wasn't as high as it is now, he had lost about 9 of his grandparents. And so one day I asked him, I said, okay, this is like number 8 or number 9 on your grandparents that have died. How many grandparents do you have? How many times have your surviving grandparents remarried? And he told me that I got him, that I busted him, because he was really great at making excuses. So he didn't have those life circumstances, but we do have those with our students nowadays, and especially with adult students. Some of them are not only taking care of their elderly parents. Some of them are spouses of military deployed spouses. Some of them are military and deployed, and so they have some heavy duty circumstances. Some of them all of a sudden become unemployed because of shifts in the economy, downsizing where they were working, and now they're facing that challenge. And so those are kind of tough. Can we have the next slide, please?
Okay, so I added a few quotes of my own here. My Japanese is not real good, so I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but I love this quote, that failure is the key to success. Each mistake teaches us something. And so that's basically what Dr. Woods has shared in many of the examples, and many of the you who shared your thoughts on failure early on, that it's learning opportunities. Don't be afraid to fail. Failure is just a detour on the path to success.
By the way, that was my favorite actress.
And life isn't perfect. Any failures you have are actually learning moments. They teach us how to grow and evolve. So you see our theme here. And this little short video here, it gives a perspective on, a different perspective on failure in terms of keeping track of them and the learnings from them as part of our failure resume.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Pinkcast. I'm here at Stanford University School of Engineering with Professor of Practice Tina Seelig. You know Tina from her books, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20, Inside Out, and other fine titles. She is here to share with you, Pinkcast viewers, a piece of advice. Tina.
Well, my biggest advice for you in 1 minute is to keep a failure resume. Now, what is that?
Yes, what is a failure resume?
It's a list.
I have a feeling mine will be quite long.
Well, mine is really long. In fact, I add to it every day. Essentially, It's a list of all your biggest screw-ups, personal, professional, and academic.
Oh, my.
And the idea is you can't just write down what you did. You have to write down what you learned from it.
Oh.
And essentially, this becomes a document of everything you learn every single day. And it's much more likely that you will not repeat the same mistakes if you actually write them down, acknowledge them, and write down what you've learned from them.
So do you keep a file on your computer? Is that how it works?
Well, sometimes it's in my head, but sometimes I write it down, and I actually require my students to do this.
Interesting.
Yeah, we do classes on risk-taking and failure, and I teach the students that failure is just data.
Yeah,
But you need
sure,
to mine
that's true,
it.
right.
You need to mine it so
Right.
you actually learn something.
Right, right. And without the mining, it's useless. It's just regret in some ways.
Exactly.
So do you share your failure resume with other people, or is it something that's really for you?
Good question. In fact, in my book, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20, I actually put my own failure resume.
Of course, yeah.
One of the young students who read an early version of the book said, I love this concept. I'd like to see an example. And I said, well, whose example am I going to put in? So I ended up writing my own and putting in the book.
That is such great advice, Pinkcast viewers. So go out there right now and start a failure resume. Thanks to Tina Seelig.
Oh, that goes on your failure
That's my failure resume. I've just added to my failure resume with this Pinkcast. Thanks for watching.
And I shared this video with my students, and I've had several that have appreciated the video enough to comment on it and said that they were starting their failure resumes. And again, the key is acknowledging it, but also writing down what we learned from it. Segue into some tips from learning from failure. So certainly the failure resume would be an example of a self-reflection in order to understand factors contributing to the failure, but again, moving beyond just the failure, but to the actual learning. But oftentimes there are some underlying assumptions, some beliefs that we have. Dr. Wood shared about the beliefs related to math that can sometimes reinforce math anxieties. And then critically analyzing the situation, what we did, as well as the internal and external factors that may have contributed to the outcome. Seeking mentorship and guidance in order to gain new perspectives. That's where we as faculty and staff, and also as peers of our students, serve as mentors to help them gain those insights and learn alternative ways. Acknowledging and processing the emotional impact of the failure. So what's your energy like now around this? Are you feeling fatigued, frustrated, like you want to give up, angry at the world, or hopeful and optimistic? And being able to recognize and address and regulate those emotions to keep them from becoming barriers or stumbling blocks. And then applying principles of appreciative inquiry, focusing on what was working well and how to build on our strengths. And then finally, viewing failure again as a potential catalyst for growth and resilience, which is a recurrent theme of our session today. And I'm sure many, if not all of us, are familiar with the growth mindset paradigm. Examining, again, what am I saying to myself? What do I see students saying in their emails to me or in their meetings online with me? Or what is implied by some of their statements? And depending on the relationship with the student, I might just offer an alternative statement that's a growth mindset statement, or I might challenge them. Did you hear what you just said? Or it's interesting that you wrote that. What advice would you give to someone that you cared about who you heard say that? And usually they can reframe it quickly once it's brought to their attention, even though they didn't catch themselves and didn't realize the automatic thoughts that they were saying that were setting them up to not learn from failure. And I briefly mentioned touched on messaging. So again, these are just some examples I copied from emails. I know you had a lot going on in your personal life. I applaud you for what you were able to accomplish. Kudos on your persistence. So not over focusing on the fact that they didn't achieve the goal, but their effort also mattered. I know you struggle to keep up with assignments or course content. I frequently say I admire your persistence. I'm so proud of you. Excellent. This is one of the toughest classes in the program. You did well. I enjoyed having you in class. This would be an example for someone who probably had an A in every other class they ever had taken except mine, right? Well, you still did well. This is one of the toughest classes in the program. I enjoyed having you. And this was from a student that had to be turned in for academic dishonesty. I'm so sad, disappointed, to have to make this report. I hope this is an isolated incident and you're able to finish your program successfully, et cetera, et cetera. You have so much good to offer as a professional. I truly hope this is not a pattern typical of your work. I hope you will move forward successfully from this point and that all your future coursework and professional work demonstrates unquestionable professionalism and integrity. Dr. Woods, did you want to start with some other student stories?
Got a couple student stories, and thank you, Dr. Harper. But first I need to read from one of our audience members. And she talks about the math phobia is so frustrating to me. I see students making estimates all the time. They can tell me how many students they are attracted to and which class and how often they see them. They can also then guess the probability that attractive student will be in a given class. How is that not math? I used to use this example all the time. Well, that leads right into one of my stories because I was teaching managerial economics, which is a graduate level class, for the very first time, and I was nervous. Matter of fact, I was stressed out about it because I got called like 3 days before the class was going to start and said, we had someone who had to cancel teaching. We need you to teach this class. I said, oh man. And I was thinking to myself, I don't have flexibility in that class. I've never taught it before. And so how can I answer all of their questions? And I thought, man, this is rough. And I was really stressed out. I was losing sleep trying to get, slamming in to get all the preparation, as much of it as I can. And, my dean told me, hey, look, all you got to do is get 1 week ahead of the students. I said, what if they're thinking 5 weeks ahead of me? And so that was hurtful. But then the night that I got into that class, and I had to have a whole week's material because one class a week, that's a whole week's material ready for that night, and not just have notes, but I needed that flexibility. And when I got in and I went through the attendance with the class, one young lady stood up right away. And she says, Dr. Woods, I can't do this. I've looked at the math in this thing and I cannot do it. And I said, you're gonna be able to do it. She says, no, I can't. I'm never any good at any of this. And I thought, oh man, she's telling other people in this class that she can't do it, and therefore there's probably a couple of them who were thinking that they can't do it. What am I gonna do with this? And I said, well, okay, hold on 1 second. Here, I got a question for the class. How many of you are either good or great at math? And so not all the hands went up, but a bunch of hands went up. I said, would you mind if I group some of the people who need to learn a little bit more about math, and I'll help you guys, but group you guys together and have teams, and we'll work on everything in teams. And they said, oh yeah, sure, sure, sure. And then I looked at the other students and I said, do you mind working that way? And we're gonna get this set for the whole semester, 15 weeks. And we're going to make this work. Do you think that you can work with that under those conditions? And they all said yes. And that helped to calm me down. So they kept me from failing when I was struggling with that at that moment. And then I found another way to teach the formulas too. And because I'd done computer work and everything, and I knew that computers, they had bytes and bits and megabytes and chunks of information. When I was looking at studying my notes and taking notes, I figured out how to write the information on the formulas in chunks. And so I draw a square on the, white chalk or the markers. I would draw a square on the wall and then draw another square. Those were the steps. I said, let's concentrate on this step. And they were able to isolate it. Even the ones that were weaker at it, they were able to isolate it, and they were writing those notes down. And so all of a sudden I was so happy. And I was
Well,
beat.
we're about out of time. We have less than a minute left.
Okay. So the whole goal here is not just teaching the students, but we're supporting their self-esteem. And that's what they believe in themselves. And then we're supporting their ability to have self-efficacy and strong self-efficacy. And so that's their ability to actually achieve the task at hand that's assigned to them. And so when you're thinking about this, you're not just thinking about failure, we're thinking about working with them on how they think about themselves. And so that's all I have for this. And I'll
Yeah,
stop.
so we're out of time. You can share your quotes in the chat. Probably don't have time to go online, but thank you all for being here. And if you have any quick questions or examples you want to share, we'll monitor the chat until they kick us out the room.
Thank you, Dr. Woods and Dr. Harper. That was great. If anybody has any questions, we do have a couple minutes. I will stop the recording.